for being here. I'm Michael Pazeian, and I put this session together to, generate some ideas that I have been dealing with for a number of years of supervising student teachers. Briefly, I did most of my teaching at Los Alamitos High School in Southern California, West Orange County. Retired in 2013 and started putting together some materials and publishing some things. If you look my name up on Amazon, you'll see some of my stuff. Totally up to you. I'm not, encouraging or anything like that. I've been supervising student teachers since 2013, first for University of Phoenix. Then I spent a year with Cal State Long Beach before I moved up here to Humboldt. And this will be my fourth year with Cal Poly Humboldt. I've picked 5 topics, and we're going to break into groups. The topics are diversity in the classroom, critical thinking, questioning, and active listening. And research and some debate. With the help of Adrian, we're gonna break into groups. Each group will have one topic. Please read through the material, talk about it, come up with some most important highlights, things that you can use, that you are important to you as a group, as individuals, and then we'll get back together in about 25 minutes and we'll have each group share, okay? So basically what I'm doing is I'm modeling here how I would do a lesson in my history class, where I would divide topics into groups, have them digest materials and come back and teach. Okay, I'm a firm believer in being a guide on the side and not the sage on the stage. So that's the format that I want to use here. Any questions before we break out? Okay, thank you all for digesting the information and being prepared to report back to us. We really appreciate it. I would like to hear from the active listening group first.
Well, I think one of the things we talked about was that it's a two-way street. The environment has to be set up by the speaker to be something that the listener is willing to participate in. And then the listener also has to be aware of their surroundings and how they might feel about the topic that they might be hearing about. Starters.
We talked a little bit about kind of the norms and biases that we may carry with active listening, and kind of engaging with our candidates and asking them what thoughts they have around active listening, because sometimes our biases or our preconceived notions can affect how we observe active listening or what we really understand true active listening is. So that's something that's really important to address right off the bat. And then just being an active listener means being aware of what's around you and also what's inside of you, how you're emotionally present, how you're physically present, what both of those look and feel like, and how you feel during this conversation. If you're going in with an attitude of, I have thoughts on the topic, on the person, and this situation, why I'm here, that's going to affect the outcome and what you receive from the conversation. And when you're playing your part and as an active listener, when you build that rapport, when you're physically and mentally present, when you rephrase what somebody says, when you add to the conversation, when you ask clarifying questions, when you make your point or opinions and you talk about what's next, those are ways that you are showing evidence of active listening.
A term that I use with my student teachers, a term that I've used with my students for all of the years that I've taught, is frame of reference. That each one of us is a product of all of the experiences that we've had since birth. Even in the womb, we experience. And it shapes us as a human, as a person, as a personality. And it's a filter for everything else that comes through. And if we understand self, we can understand others and be a good listener. Anything else on active listening?
I'll just say,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry,
No,
Rowan.
go ahead.
I'll just say it's almost like it does take work to be an active listener. You have to, force yourself or train yourself to be engaged with the speaker and in the conversation, to continue on, to ask questions, to reiterate what they're trying to communicate. And it does take work, and you have to, always try to stop yourself from jumping in or interrupting. You have to, it is a process, and it does take work, and practice makes perfect.
An aspect of what you're talking about is that we are verbal and nonverbal. I'm looking at myself at the screen, and I talk with my hands and my face and my body language, as well as with my voice. And if we relay that to our student teacher, and they relay that to their students, everybody's going to communicate better.
Yeah, and I just wanted to thank you too for that amazing, amazing resources you shared with us, because I feel like a lesson on active listening alone is what candidates need in order to teach their students too. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
We also mentioned that. Oh.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, we also mentioned that with social media, that the way we communicate with each other has changed a lot from years ago when we may have started teaching. That in those times we had more opportunity for one-on-one back and forth discussion or listening. But now with social media, even though you're the speaker, it's a delayed response. So people can choose to listen or not listen. And so I think it's correct in what we were saying about it's practice. We have to think about it now. Doesn't come naturally to be a listener. We're just let things kind of wash over us, and then we decide if we want to respond or participate.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on to questioning.
I'll take a shot at that. This is Ramon. So yes, we looked through the different levels of Bloom's taxonomy and questioning, and so we focused our attention at the higher three: analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. And so we discussed preparing our students and making efforts to elicit reflection from them and how they might be able to address these levels in questioning, but then also getting them to build performance-based activities on these, referring to these different levels. And so then that becomes a little bit more challenging, but then that's our responsibility to work with our student teachers and build on those skills to get students to not only answer those questions at the higher three levels, but then to perform those critical thinking skills of, for example, being creative or evaluating and that type of thing. And so it becomes a little bit more challenging. And we wrapped up our discussion on how will we go about that. So a lot of eliciting, getting teachers to talk about it and making efforts to apply. But then at the same time, if they're not getting it, then we need to become a little bit more direct and continue to work with them through the process. In our evaluations, I don't know if they're different from institutions to institutions, but the one that I have, there is one that is specific to promoting students' critical and creative thinking and analysis. And so I have those discussions. Okay, I want to help you get to the exceeding level of the rubric, and so it's just something that we need to continue to work with them and provide them as many examples as possible.
Each one of you, when you're working with your students, will tell them, get to know your audience, get to know the group of students that is in front of you. That will tell them, how soon can I use the higher levels of thinking? Do I, do just comprehension for the first month or so before I get to analysis and before I get to synthesis and evaluation? And then the questions, the specific, and you have that list of questions, when to use the questions. One of the biggest things, the problems that I had, is that I come out of college and I've got all of this great knowledge about the history of this country, and I want to give it to people. And your students become passive learners. And all of the research says, if they're passive in the classroom, they're not learning. If they're active in the classroom, they will learn. So I had to train myself to shut up and just ask questions. And then all of a sudden they started gelling between the two of them, and you get to all of the different things going on, critical thinking and questions and active listening, and it all fits together. Okay, I'm talking too much. Anything else? Okay, we need to go to critical thinking. Hello, critical thinker group.
Well, we did critical thinking, and it led really well to how our education has shifted from the whole learning to the thinking. So it lent itself well to that. But one of the things in the definition, it was obviously logical connections between ideas and explore and understand our world, but constantly upgrading. And so that made me connect to constantly becoming, which I think has been a theme of our workshops. It went into talking about 16 characteristics of a good critical thinking thinker. And we chose introspection for self-reflection, objectivity, and we thought that was interesting because a lot of times when we're thinking about something, and just how Michael had said, that we're shaped already, we're bringing in our own experiences and biases, and we always say forget about your biases, but here they said bring them out, recognize them, and when you're looking at something, see, am I bringing in my biases, am I not? So to have them on the forefront, to be able to make sure that you're not being biased instead of forget about them. So we thought that was interesting. And then Paula had brought up, which was effective communication, that after you spend all this time in exploring something, being able to communicate is very important in the process of being a critical thinker as well.
Yeah. What, I purposely divided you guys out to handle just one topic. But when you take all of this together, it really fits, and it supports all of these different ideas to change the classroom, to change your student teacher into a teacher who's going to be the guide on the side instead of the sage on the stage. Okay. Whole class discussion, research and debate. Quickly, we're running out of time and we need to get to diversity.
I can speak on that, although
Oh, Lynette, would you like to?
I was just gonna say, we talked about, one of our members, and I can't remember her name, was talking about how she does debate with her sixth graders. And we went on to discuss how young you should start, how young the children can be to start learning how to discuss things and to keep it simple. And they can start down in kindergarten, first grade, not as debating teams or anything like that, but just learning how to discuss it with your neighbor, and if you agree or disagree, and then just add a little bit more every year as you go on. But that's not something that you would want a student teacher to do right away. They would have to, learn the classroom procedure and work with their teacher, their mentor teacher. But we had a nice discussion, and I learned a lot as a supervisor. So
Great. Thank you. Okay, diversity.
Well, we talked about also like getting to know our audience, getting to know our students, because that's going to inform us of the diversity we have in our classroom, and exposing them to different viewpoints, not just like within themselves, but outside themselves, right? Like making sure that they understand like somebody else's viewpoint that's not perhaps something that you agree with, but you have to expose them to that so they can get to know the world around them. So another thing I mentioned was about I have to teach heroes. So what I try to do is I try to get to know my students, where they come from, right? Like where their roots are. And I had a little boy that like his dad is from Italia, right? From Italy. So I wanted to make sure I brought a hero from his part of the world, so that way he felt identified as well in the classroom. And I don't know if you guys want to add to that.
We also spoke about how to basically utilize the funds of knowledge that students have, that they actually bring into the classroom from their different cultural perspectives. And that can be a very powerful way of tapping into certain topics and making sure that students know that there are many different kind of viewpoints around one, a certain particular topic. So that it's quite powerful.
One of the things I shared with the group is, and I've shared with others, is that our student teachers need to know the community that they're teaching in and know the students that they're teaching and their cultural backgrounds and the diversity that is there, and to make sure that we celebrate the diversity and the differences within the classroom. I'm a history teacher, so I've put together materials that have lessons that at every grade level, K-12, dealing with the social sciences for Hispanics, African Americans, Asian Americans, Native Americans, women, et cetera, et cetera. And it's very, very important to do that. And as supervisors, we need to constantly say, are you handling, dealing with, emphasizing, celebrating the diversity within your classroom? Okay. Any other questions, comments? I'm active listening.
I'm wondering
Thank you.
if Jane wanted to add, I know she was about to say something earlier, but maybe one of her group members captured what she was thinking.
Well, I like to add that I just really appreciate what everybody has said. One thing is that we actually talked in depth in our small group about topics that are controversial, complex, open-ended, where there is some biases that bleed into those conversations and how we can help students really deconstruct the misinformation or perspectives that they're bringing into the conversation, and having a safe but brave space for that conversation so that students don't feel attacked. And that's something we talked about, is when a topic gets too hot and where there's emotions involved, that it can go in a direction that might not be productive, but that one of the principles that was outlined in the Google Doc was that we prepare our students for that conversation by setting some norms and really talking about how do we support this with evidence that we can rely on and trust, and that it's not just social media misinformation and such. So critical conversations have to also happen in the ways that we prepare the students to have those conversations. So just really appreciate that. That was mentioned and touched on by other groups too.
Yeah. A positive, safe environment for learning. It must happen every single minute of every single classroom. Thank you all. Really appreciate your participation in this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. I have dropped into the chat the next 2 sessions, the last ones for the day. We'll also have a choice debrief session at the very end. These resources are fantastic. I'm really excited to be able to share with them. And to reiterate something that came up at the lunch conversation, the recordings, as well as all these resources, will be accessible to you on the website, as well as through our YouTube channel. But looking forward to continuing the conversation as we move into the conference. We have about a 10-minute break. Again, the next session will be starting at 1:50. So virtual round of applause for Michael. Thank you for preparing this and for sharing your expertise.